Alan Stein Jr., welcome back to the Mindset Advantage podcast. You were on the show a little over a year and a half ago. It's one of my favorite conversations that I've ever done in the last 7 years. And I'm so glad to hear that you have a book out and you're coming back on the show. So thanks for being here today.
I'm excited to be back and congratulations on your consistency and your longevity. And I believe you said this is episode 510. So that's very impressive, my friend.
Thank you, Alan. So let's jump into your brand new book. I love the title. The concept is truly one that fits everybody, whether you're a coach, an athlete, a parent, a leader. It's all about next play and next play mentality. A lot of my audience probably has heard this phrase before. They might be a little familiar with it, but just so we don't jump the gun too much, can you kind of set the table for where you got next play, why it's important, and perhaps what it really looks like?
Sure. The short definition of next play is to shift your focus off of what just happened and put it on what's happening right now. So shift it off to what just happened a few moments ago and put it on what's right in front of you at present. That's really the epicenter of what the entire mindset is. And I first learned about it from my coaching idol, Coach K. He wrote a book in the early 2000s called Leading with the Heart. And that was the first time that I had even heard of the concept. And I remember reading it, and conceptually and logically, it made a lot of sense to me. But in the spirit of vulnerability, I didn't have the emotional maturity to even adopt it in my life at that point. It was one of those things that's like, yeah, that makes sense. I should probably do that. And then I didn't, and probably wasn't capable of it. I had a lot of difficulty moving on to next plays, and I would allow myself to get emotionally hijacked, usually in the form of frustration or disappointment or irritation when something wasn't going my way, and would kind of stay stuck in that. Well, if you fast forward just over a decade after reading that, I started to work at DeMatha Catholic High School as a performance coach. And the coach at the time was a gentleman named Mike Jones, who's one of the finest leaders I've ever been around. And I saw Coach Jones apply the next play mindset at DeMatha with the players and staff every single day. I mean, he would talk about it in practice, in meetings, in film sessions, during games, and he would always just say next play. And he'd make this hand gesture as if you're turning the page, flipping the script. And it was at DeMatha where I saw it put into action that it really started to sink in and resonate with me. And after being at DeMatha for a couple of years, it became a staple of my own life, my own mindset, my own perspective. And it's probably the single stickiest and most impactful thing that I've ever applied to my life as far as the results that I get from it. So that was really the reason for writing the book, was simply to pay forward something that has been very valuable to me. And I like to say it's been valuable in the locker room, it's been valuable in the boardroom, and it's been valuable in my living room with my own family. So the utility that Next Play has is all encompassing, which is another reason that I love it.
I think it's sticky. I think it's great. Sometimes what I like to do when we introduce a topic like this, Alan, is also talk about perhaps what it isn't. Like, can we polarize this and maybe answer, Alan, like what do people get wrong about next play? It might be obvious to some, but what are some mistakes that could happen when somebody tries to understand next play mentality?
Well, I'll share the mistakes that I've made with it. You know, the first is and most people tend to use next play as a temporary fix to overcome the negative, to overcome the frustration. You know, in basketball talk, don't worry about the turnover, don't worry about the missed shot, don't worry about the referee's missed call, just move to the next play. And I do believe there's tremendous power in using it that way. But we also need to use it in the positive. You know, an example of that is after you make a three-pointer, you don't need to dance around for 20 minutes. Like, you did your job, you made a shot, you still have to quickly move to the next play. Another mistake that I think, at least I've made, is only using it in the micro, is only using it as, all right, I got to move to the next play, when there's a huge application to zooming out and using it in the macro. And the best example I can think of that is, you know, I'm almost 50 years old. I'll be 50 in a couple months. And, you know, I've already gone through so many transitions in life, and I have so many more transitions that are right on the horizon. You know, some of the transitions that I've been before, you know, you go from being in high school to being in college, from being in college to being in the real world, from being single to being married, from being married to having kids. In my case, from being married to then being divorced. You know, so you go through a lot of different changes. You know, I went from being a basketball performance coach to being a corporate keynote speaker. Some of the transitions that I know are on the horizon, and I say this with a heavy heart. My parents aren't in great health. Like my parents most likely won't be around that much longer. And of course, time is never promised anyway. So that will be a transition going from someone that has always had two parents to maybe not. My children are all teenagers right now. So in the blink of an eye, I'll be an empty nester. And I'll go from spending 18 years of having kids at home to now they're young adults and they're doing their thing. So there's all sorts of transitions we go through. And it's really important to apply the next play mentality to that and to be able to say, hey, when my life circumstances change, how can I step into a new next play and make this the best chapter of my life? Other people go through, being laid off from a job or having to move across the country for a relationship or for a job. There's just so many transitions, and learning how to let go of the previous set of circumstances that's no longer true and lean into and accept and appreciate the new set of circumstances is also a view of next play. And then one more, and I know this was a mouthful. I want to make sure that next play, while we want to have short-term urgency, we also want to have long-term patience. And I don't want folks to not enjoy the moment because they're always thinking about the next thing. I want you to sit in the moment. And I want you to do that on both sides of the spectrum. When you're feeling frustrated and angry and disappointed and some of the what we would normally call the unpleasant or undesired emotions, I want you to sit with them. I don't want you to ignore them, repress them, suppress them, or try to get away from them. I want you to feel them because they'll help be fuel for dictating a very good next play. Very similarly, when things go well, I know you're doing a lot of speaking now and you crushed a keynote this morning. I want you to enjoy that. I want you to take a few moments and pat yourself on the back for a job well done and really reflect on all the work that you put in to deliver to that audience. I don't want you to step off stage and just go, all right, when's my next one? When's my next one? So some of it is we want to be able to stop and smell the roses and enjoy our lives, but then at some point redirect our focus to whatever's next. So those are the three biggest, I guess we could say, missteps that I know I commonly made myself.
When I was studying improv, this showed up as well. I mean, next play really shows up everywhere. And if you know anything about improv, and listeners, you might know this from previous episodes, but one of the things that they do is what's called a yes and exercise, where they go from person to person. And before you start what you're going to say, you have to start with the words yes and. And I've done this with teams before, and it's just so powerful. And the exercise of yes, I'm accepting reality and I'm adding my next piece to it. The breakthrough for me, Alan, was just because we accept it doesn't mean we have to like it. Because I think what can happen sometimes with next play is that, hey, I'm not okay with the fact that I just missed that free throw. I'm not okay that I just missed that shot. Like I'm frustrated about that. You're just telling me just to flip the page and act like it's okay. That's not what we're saying. And I love for you to double click on that is we're accepting reality. We're adding to it, but that doesn't mean that I'm like, hey, it's all good. I'm okay with losing and I'm okay with airballing shots. What are your thoughts on that? Accepting it and not letting the emotion be in charge of how you respond.
Oh, you just said that so brilliantly. And this is something I talk about with my children all the time. And in fact, if I had to pick a single skill set that I hope I can help my children work towards mastery of, it would be emotional regulation. And it would be what I tell them all the time is every emotion and feeling is okay, but every behavior is not. And you have to learn how to separate the two. There is nothing wrong, as you just said so insightfully, with being frustrated at missing a free throw. In fact, if you've put in the work during the unseen hours and you're a good shooter and you've made thousands and thousands and thousands of free throws during the unseen hours, you probably should be a little frustrated that you missed it. But you cannot let that frustration dictate your behavior. You can't let your frustration cause you to have bad body language or to pout or to then lazily get back on defense or to let it drag you down to the point that the next time you shoot free throws, you're going in with a pessimistic mindset because you missed one. So every emotion is okay. Every behavior is not. And once again, I want folks to feel those emotions. I try really hard now in my own language to not label emotions as good or bad or right or wrong. I try to take the subjectivity out of it and look at everything through a neutral, sterile lens because I don't believe feeling frustrated or angry is actually a bad thing. Now, we can have very bad behaviors if we allow those to be in the driver's seat, but we have emotions for a reason. They're flag posts to help us guide and let us know red flags when things are wrong, or how we can better navigate the world. So there's nothing wrong with feeling angry unless you allow that anger to dictate how your behavior, the decisions you make, or how you show up. Because most people, if they're being honest, would agree that when they're feeling dejected, disappointed, frustrated, jealous, irritated, if they allow that to drive the car, they're probably not making their best decisions. So I try to remove my feelings and emotions from my behavior and the decision making, but I allow myself to feel however I want to feel. And, if I can, again, speak with some vulnerability, when I look back on my life, I'm almost 50 years old. I have made numerous poor decisions. I have made plenty of boneheaded decisions. I've made bad financial decisions. I've made bad relationship decisions. And a couple of things about that. Number one, I've given myself the grace and space and self compassion to forgive my previous self for some of those indiscretions. It doesn't serve me any good to cling on to that and to keep beating myself up and being critical. At the time, I made the best decision I was capable of with the tools I had. I can say with a huge smile that I just didn't have as many tools back then as maybe I have now. So I've completely learned to let go and forgive myself for all of those mistakes. And that's also a big portion of being able to move to the next play, is to not tether to those. But if I'm also being honest, every single poor decision I've made in my life has been a cause of four things. It was either my ego, my fear, my insecurity, or my impatience. Those are the four things that I allowed to hijack me to make really poor decisions. So moving forward, now that I have that awareness, trust me, I still have fears. I still have insecurities. I still have a pretty decent ego, and I'm still fairly impatient. I haven't cured myself of those afflictions, but I'm now aware of them, and I'm very careful when I make decisions moving forward, financial, relationship, business decisions. I make sure that they're not coming from a place that stems from one of those four roots. I make sure that I'm saying, all right, am I making this decision right now because I'm just really impatient and I want to have some closure? Am I making this decision because I'm scared of the alternative? Am I making this decision because of something I'm really insecure about? Am I trying to people please or be a yes man? Or, so I'm always unpacking those, and I'm doing the best I can not to make mistakes from those places. And I know I'm going to make plenty of mistakes over the next 50 years. And yes, you guys heard that right. I actually believe I'm only at the halftime of my life. And I have both the optimism and the delusion to believe I'm going to live another 50 years. But my goal is to make my next 50 my best 50 by not repeating the same mistakes and patterns that I've had before. So I just laugh that in the next 50 years, I'm going to make a fresh batch of new mistakes. And I'll make plenty of them, but I'm not going to keep making the same ones I've made before.
All emotions are okay. Some behaviors are not okay. What a great sentiment. I think that's a great, like, write that one down, you guys. What a great sentiment. I think about this next play mentality, Alan, and one of the things I think about, if there's like a 101 level next play mentality, and then there's kind of these higher levels. Like you see some people, some dudes and gals who have this at a really high level, at the pro level. And what, to me, the biggest difference between I understand it, I think I got it, to I'm a master at next play is the speed, how fast they can do it. And so you look at guys like, there's a bunch of clips of Tom Brady, right? They got 35 seconds in between plays. I have a clip that I show sometimes to athletes. He throws a ball, Mike Evans falls to the ground. There's nothing he could have done about it. The ball goes over Mike Evans' head. The camera goes right back to Tom. What does he do? He looks right down at his wrist, looking at the next play. That's how fast he goes to next play. So if we're talking about, because I think my audience understands next play, and it's like, okay, how do I get even better at it? Like I'm juiced up. I think what we should touch on is the speed at which this happens in a basketball game, in a football game. It's got to be really quick. Talk to me about what you've seen as far as the speed of next play and what it looks like at the highest level.
Well, like with anything else, it takes conditioning, it takes repetition, and it takes consistency. And you have to put those reps in. I know before we hit record, that was what you and I were talking about. The way we get good at anything is to put the reps in. Repetition's not punishment. So for me, I try to apply next play to every area of my life. So that way I'm getting reps in every day. No matter what I'm doing, I'm getting reps of practicing moving to the next play. But also with any type of skill acquisition, like when I think back when I was a young basketball player, and a coach or a trainer would show me a new move. I mean, you go through the beginning stages of It's clunky and it's awkward because I've never done this before. But so you're doing it at a much slower pace than you'll need to execute it during a game because you're still trying to get the footwork down and the mechanics down. And then each repetition, you start to groove a little bit of a pattern and it becomes a little less clunky and a little less awkward. And then as you start to groove that pattern, then you can slowly increase speed a little bit. Now, in a sport like basketball, which is the world that I lived in, you start by doing everything what we call 1-on-0. There is no defense. Now, maybe you put a cone there, but there's no one trying to stop you. So it's really just you against you. And you're learning the new footwork, you're learning the new move, and you're going to do hundreds and hundreds of reps until you start to clean it up a little bit. You get a little more efficient. And of course, while you're doing that, hopefully you have a competent trainer or coach who's offering you real-time feedback in the moment. Or you're able to film yourself with your phone and watch it again. So that the coach can say, "Hey, Alan, you got to move your left foot 10 degrees in this direction to be." So you're tweaking and you're iterating and you're getting a little bit better, and then you keep working on it and working on it, and then you finally get to a point where it's pretty mechanically clean, and the speed is decent. Well, then we have to level it up again and actually put a defender in place. And normally, what we would do in skill acquisition is we would start with what's called a dummy defender. It's basically just a human that's going to stand there and kind of move their hands, but they're not trying to lock you up and play real defense. But it's definitely a step up from when there was just a cone there. And then you do the same thing. You put in hundreds of reps and slowly get closer to game speed. And then you get to the point where it's live one-on-one and you're trying to execute this move against a live defender and do that for hundreds of reps. And then finally, you'll get to a point where the move becomes second nature and the speed becomes game-like and you're going at it live. But that takes thousands of repetitions. And generally speaking, that's not all done in one afternoon. That's going to be done over the course of days, weeks, and in many cases, months. But then you can finally add that move to your offensive game. Well, it's the same thing with what you just described. You can't have someone read the next play book and then the next morning they're a master at doing it immediately. You've got to practice. You've got to start off, and it's going to feel clunky at first. There's going to be times where you don't even realize that you're stuck in the previous play. So someone's going to have to heighten your awareness that, hey, DJ, pick your head up, man. You missed the shot. Not a big deal. Next play, next play. And you'll go through that exact same process. And of course, Tom Brady has got to a point where, he'd been playing football for decades and had worked himself up to that was just second nature to him. That you overthrow a pass, not a big deal. Next play. So like anything, it just takes practice. And that's where we have to have the patience, the self-compassion, the grace to allow ourselves to play in the mess. I can say without question, I told you, I read about next play in 2001. I didn't really see it put into action until 2010. I wasn't able to actually start using it in my life effectively till probably 2015. And here we are 10 years after that, and I'm finally getting pretty good at it. So you're talking about a 24-year learning curve. Now, I don't think anyone else will need to go as slow as I did, but like right now, I execute next play in my life more effectively than I ever have at any previous time. And I was pretty good at it a couple years ago, but I'm getting better at it. And if you have me on your show for episode 700, I'll be even better at it then. So I'm going in the right direction, which is also part of next play, is I'm learning to let go of what was, and I'm focusing on what is. And that is the ability to use the next play mindset.
In your experience working with coaches and athletes in the sports space, what gets in the way of teams not being able to have next play mentality?
Several things. Well, I believe everything starts and stops with leadership. So first and foremost, you have to have a head coach and a coaching staff that lives and breathes and models next play in everything that they do. If you only talk about next play during the games, you're not going to have very much recall. You got to talk about it during practice, during workouts, during film sessions, in the weight room, when you're talking to your kids about their academic work. Like next play has to be very holistic. So that's certainly one. It's not a part-time mentality. It needs to be an all-in mentality. The second is Leadership 101 dictates that we need to model the behavior we want to see in others. So if you're a coach and you're listening to this and you're telling your players to move to the next play when they miss a shot, but you're still yelling at the referee for a call they missed 2 possessions ago, you're modeling the exact opposite behavior that you want them to emulate. And your players will always model what you do, not necessarily what you say. So as a coach, you have to move to the next play. I mean, same thing. Think about how many times out of frustration and when a team's not playing well, a coach calls timeout, brings the team over to the bench, and proceeds to berate them for everything they did wrong in the last 2 minutes. Well, they clearly haven't moved on to the next play either. They're still talking about the shot that DJ missed 2 minutes ago. So they're not modeling that behavior. So to me, that's really important. And then really the third pillar is again, you praise the behavior you want to see, and you coach up the behavior that you don't. So you need to hold your players to a high level of accountability. And it's the old coaching adage is you either accept it or you correct it, which means when you see players on your team doing next play, call it out, coach it up, acknowledge it, praise it, because that which gets praised gets repeated. When you see players on your team not modeling next play, care enough about them to call that out and to coach that up and to let them know how they can behave in a better manner. So I think if coaches are willing to do all of that, then you create an environment where the next play mentality can grow.
Whew. Man, that's it right there. That's such a masterclass clip right there. If you can, go back and re-listen to that. That is so fantastic. I think as coaches, it's so easy for us to get caught up in the last play, where the best coaches I've been around, some of that have been on the show, Alan, they see themselves as I'm a problem solver and a fixer, meaning I'm always looking ahead to what's going to happen next. Oh, we're in foul trouble here. I need to be thinking about what I'm going to do. They're always forward thinking versus if you're coming to the bench and you're calling a timeout, and we're spending 80% of the time talking about something that already happened. What's going to be the result of that? The kids, the athletes, they're going to live in the same past because we're still talking about it. And so, yes, there are times where we need to coach upon the things that we saw, but maybe it's not during the timeout in a game. Maybe we save that for a film session. Maybe we save that for a different time, right? I think let's just double down on that again, because I think that is so huge that if you, as a coach, if you want your team to have next play mentality, you need to have next play mentality.
Without question. And you said something brilliant there, which is in the heat of the battle, that's very rarely the best time to debrief and to learn a lesson, especially if we're going to talk about sport. In the middle of play, you just have to wipe the slate clean and move to the next play. Now, the next day, when we can take a breath and we can actually go back and watch film, we can debrief and we can go back and say, okay, why was that not the best shot for DJ to take? Or why did we make that turnover? Because we do want to learn a lesson from it to decrease the chance that we'll repeat that behavior. But in the moment is very, very rarely the best time to do that. So yeah, we want to be forward thinking. We want to think about the next play. And if you want to just, the best way I can think to break it down is any energy or focus that you waste on something that is in the past that is unchangeable means you don't have that energy or focus available in the present moment where you can still make a difference. So if you're wasting your energy and focus on the shot you missed 30 seconds ago, you no longer have that asset available to put into the next shot or the next play. So learning to quickly untether, and that's another huge part of next play, is untethering from results, is realizing that your results are not who you are. Stephen Curry knows he's the best shooter on the planet. And if the next game that Golden State plays, he goes 0 for 20, that doesn't change the fact that he's the best shooter on the planet. Now he'd prefer not to go 0 for 20, and Steve Kerr and the rest of the coaching staff and all of the fans would prefer that he doesn't go 0 for 20, but he's not married or tethered to the result. He'll do the best he can to take great shots from great spots at game speed, shots that he knows he's capable of making, and then that's all he can do. He does not control whether or not the ball goes in the basket. So a player like Stephen Curry is just going to focus on the process of using good mechanics, being on balance, having good footwork, and taking open shots. And if he can do that, that will greatly increase the chance that shots will go in. And when they don't, it doesn't matter. He's completely untethered from it. He doesn't identify his self-worth or his self-belief through outcomes. It's all about the process. And that's another area where I know that I did very poorly in my younger years, and I'm getting way better at doing that now. Letting go of outcomes and results and focusing on the process. Now, with that said, before you go get a whole bunch of crazy comments, outcomes are very important. I'm not saying that winning isn't important and making shots isn't important. What I'm saying is the best way to make those outcomes come true is to focus on the process. And a huge pillar of the process is the ability to untether and just move to the next play no matter what, is to be completely free. And the last thing I'll say on this, I do still do some work with some collegiate basketball programs. And I always say to the players on the first day, your coaching staff's job is to teach you how to make shots. My job is to teach you how to miss shots. And then, of course, I always pause because they're thinking, what do you mean teach us how to miss? And I'll say, obviously, the goal is to make the shot, but I need to teach you how to respond when you miss. I want you to make it. You want to make it. The coaches want you to make it. The fans want you to make it. But let's be honest, even if you are the best shooter in the country, you will miss half of the shots you take. And I want to improve your behavior, your response, and your bounce back during the 50% of shots that you are going to miss, because I don't want those to negatively affect the future shots you'll take after that. So I'm in the business of teaching players how to miss.
I love that. And you teed up the Steph Curry. I want to show you this clip, Alan, if you haven't seen it yet. This is phenomenal. So recently, Steph Curry was on Bryson DeChambeau's YouTube channel. They went out golfing, and they talked about next play mentality. So I'm going to cue this up and get your thoughts on it.
To dive.
Let's go. That's what's up. That's nervy, bro. That's nervy. Good putt.
Wanted to dive left.
Yeah. Two more holes to go. 2 birdies. We shoot 49. Let's go. This is what makes champions right here.
Talk to him. You know what you gotta do, and you gotta show up and do it. That's it.
Yeah. Isn't that cool, like, lesson for kids though, and people that are watching? Like, no matter how good you start or how bad you start or whatever, you still gotta get the job done, no matter what. And so, like, for me, it's always, what's the next best thing I can do? What's the next brick I can lay?
Yeah.
Right? How can I be better each and every shot? I mean, what's your mindset on that?
So my college coach, Bob McKillop at Davidson, it was like one of his core principles. He just called it next play mentality. Mm-hmm. And then I got to live it out in real time. I had 13 turnovers in my first college game. Oh. 9 at halftime. And so my coaches at halftime, they're having the coaches meeting like, it's freshman, we're letting him play. Like, what do we do? He has 9 turnovers to the point. Next play mentality, turn it into an opportunity. I know what I need to do, and I have to make sure I don't lose my confidence through mistakes, through failure. And I still tell myself next play mentality. Like, it's just very simple, but
next shot, next play.
And you leave that in the past, you learn from it, you acknowledge it, embrace it. What you gonna do next?
You don't let it define you.
At all. And one of them was finished.
Alan, how do you process that?
Well, first of all, it makes me feel good that something that I believe in and something that I hold very sacred to unbelievable world-class performers like Bryson and Steph kind of double stamp that and claim that that's a reason that they're so successful. So yeah, I mean, that what they just said describes it perfectly. Don't worry about the shot you just had, worry about the next shot. Even if you have 13 turnovers, 9 at half, there's nothing you can do about those 13 turnovers, but you can try to be a little more intentional and purposeful with the next play that you make. And I really like what Bryson said as far as what's the next best play I can make. Like, I'll acknowledge that that shot I just hit that went into the woods is not ideal and it's not my preference. And if I had a magical wand, I would take that shot again, but I don't and I can't. So now what's the next best thing for me to do to get out of the woods? And maybe that is being very strategic to try to hit the ball somewhere else so that the shot after that can put you on the green. It doesn't mean that you got to swing for the green again and then take another bad shot and then get even more frustrated. So it's at any given moment, evaluate yourself and say, all right, the current set of circumstances are not ideal and they're not my preference, but what is something that I can do to move myself forward? And to me, I'll tell you a quick story that really summarizes that for me. So this past January, I turned 49 years old. And on my birthday, I proclaimed to my 3 teenage kids that for the next year, when I turned 50, I was going to buy myself a ticket to the Coach K fantasy basketball camp. I'm certainly a huge Coach K fan and a Duke basketball fan and a former hooper. And that has been on my bucket list of things to do my entire life. And I made that proclamation that was going to be an early 50th birthday present to myself. And my teenage son, Luke, said something incredibly profound and insightful. He said, Dad, why would you postpone for an entire year something that you know you want to do now? Like, why would you delay happiness? You know you want to do the camp. What's the difference? Because the camp happens at the end of May. So he said, what's the difference between doing the camp at the summer before you turn 50 or the summer after you turn 50? Isn't it the same thing? And I said, man, you're right. And that night I signed up for the Coach K fantasy camp. Now, for additional context, I stopped playing basketball when I turned 40. So almost a decade ago, just out of fear of getting hurt. And I had to focus on some other things. So I had to start getting myself in basketball shape. And I was taking this incredibly seriously. Like I had 6 months to prepare for camp. I hired a basketball trainer. I started playing pickup a few times a week. Like I was in it because I wanted to show up at the Coach K fantasy camp in the best shape of my life, mentally, physically, emotionally, on the court and off. I was going down there to be the best version of myself. And I was so excited for this camp. You have no idea. And it was something I was looking forward to for 6 months. And I get down to Durham and I get to Cameron Indoor Stadium and I'm at Coach K's camp. And on the first day, I shattered my elbow. On the first day, I unfortunately got my legs tangled up. I got tripped and I smacked my elbow on the hardwood. Now, at the moment that it happened, I just thought I hit my funny bone. I didn't think it was a big deal. So I just kept playing. My next play was to pop up and just keep playing. And 2 minutes later, I got fouled and I went to the free throw line. And when I went to shoot, my arm wouldn't extend because my tricep tendon had been detached. So I basically didn't have a tricep. And the ball literally just went 2 feet and hit the ground. And that's when I knew something was wrong. I went and met with the trainer. I went to the hospital that night, got an x-ray to confirm that it chipped the bone and detached the tricep tendon. And in full transparency, that night, I was really disappointed. I mean, I cried myself to sleep. Something I was so excited about in just a moment, I felt like was taken from me. And I did all of the things that most people do and that I certainly don't recommend. I threw myself a little pity party. I asked myself, why did this have to happen to me? This isn't fair. This sucks. But thankfully, I woke up the next morning and I put all of that behind me. And I said what Bryson just said during that clip. I said, all right, this is not ideal and this is not preferred, but what's the next best step I can take? And I decided in that moment that I was going to stay for the remaining 4 days of camp, that I was going to be the best teammate that I could be, that I was going to fully immerse myself in the experience, and that there was nothing to do about my elbow. They had to wait for the swelling to go down before I could do surgery. So there was nothing else to do. So we just put a protective sleeve on it, and I still had the most amazing experience at camp. And then a week later, I thankfully had a successful surgery that reattached my tricep. And then I spent 12 weeks in a very cumbersome hinge brace and wasn't able to use my right arm for a while. And that proved to be an incredible learning experience as well. So looking back now, I can say with a smile that something that I would have never in a million years wanted to happen turned out to be a blessing in disguise for a variety of reasons, because I learned a lot of things about myself and developed some new outlooks and perspectives that were certainly helpful. But I'm very grateful that I was able to move to the next play so quickly and still enjoy a remarkable time at camp. And that's an example of, well, what's the next best thing? I mean, there's nothing I can do about my elbow. I have to accept that reality that I'm not going to be able to play at camp. But what's the next best thing I can do? And I leaned into that. And I'm grateful that at almost 50 years old, I had the emotional maturity to do that. Because I can promise you, DJ, if that would have happened to a 30-year-old version of me or a 20-year-old version of me, I would have not been able to take that step. I would have pouted. I would have cursed. I probably would have, I would have gone home and pouted. I'd say there's no sense in staying at this camp if I can't play. And that wouldn't have served me in any way, shape, or form. So I'm grateful and proud of the fact that I was actually able to use Next Play and got a really great result from it.
So, Alan, perhaps the 3 barriers to get into next play mentality is blaming, complaining, and making excuses.
Yes. That trilogy of behaviors, the way I label them now, those are such devious and disgusting behaviors because they really undermine our ability to do anything it is that we want. I mean, if we were all to be honest and list the traits that we would love to see more of, like most people would love to perform and produce at a higher level. Most people would love to have more energy. Most people would love to have more optimism and confidence. Most people want to have a much better feeling of fulfillment. I mean, I know those are all of the things that I strive for, and blaming, complaining, and making excuses undermines all of those. See, when you blame, complain, and make excuses, you shift responsibility and accountability off of yourself and you put it on someone else, which basically means you are giving your power away. You are now giving your power away to the external, to circumstances and events and to other people. So for me, a much more liberating and empowering approach is to never blame, complain, or make excuses, have an attitude of extreme ownership, and always ask myself, here are the questions I ask when I fall short of a goal, or when things don't meet my preference, or I break my arm at the Coach K camp. I ask myself a bunch of questions. The first one is, well, what role did I play in this? How was I complicit in not getting what I wanted? How was I complicit in not reaching my goal? That's the first question. The second question is, well, what is the next best thing I can do? I mean, I'm taking that out of Bryson's quote there. I can't do what I originally wanted, but now that I accept my new circumstances, what is the next best thing that I can do? And then the third question I ask is, well, what can I learn from this? What's a learning opportunity? I mean, the things I learned about myself when I couldn't use my right arm for 12 weeks, I never would have been able to learn those lessons had that not happened. And as I just mentioned, I never in a million years would have asked to break my arm. So I wouldn't have learned those lessons without it. So while I hope that I don't break my arm next year at camp, I know that no matter what happens, I'm going to be able to take that next step of learning some lessons. So for me, when you stop asking and saying things that aren't helpful, like, why did this happen to me? This isn't fair. This sucks. That's not going to do anything to move you forward. And please know that I say that with compassion and no judgment. I told you that night I said all of those things to myself, but after a good night's sleep, I realized that those things would not help move me forward. So I got to let go of them. So instead of asking, why did this happen to me? This isn't fair. This sucks. Instead say, well, what was my role in this? What can I do to make this situation better? And what can I learn from this? That simple shift right there gives you all of the power. That means no matter what happens in this world, no matter what happens externally, you are still in control and you still have the power to choose your response. And to me, that's the strongest power that we as human beings possess.
I'm loving the deep dive on this subject. There's so many layers to it. You're a Coach K fan. I want to show you one more clip, and I'm sure you've seen this before, but the audience that hasn't, I think this would be another kind of angle that we can talk about next play mentality. Check this out.
Next play means basketball favors and the player and the team are continuous thinkers. You don't get time in between pitches or snaps or whatever. And so whatever you just did was important then, but it's not important now. And the best way to get to next play is to talk. And actually today was not bad with talk. There was some good talk, but you need to talk all the time and be in the moment. Our game is about great moments, right? It'd be a damn shame if you weren't ready for the moment because you were thinking about what you just did, right? And you're in control of that. And what it is, it's mental toughness. Yeah, there's physical toughness and there's mental toughness. But you're going to make a mistake. I missed a shot. You can't be thinking about the miss or the make. You got to be thinking about the rebound, the defense, or whatever the hell you're going to do. And if you don't do that, then the guy who thinks quicker than you is going to beat you, even if you're more talented than him. So the next play mentality and talk is the key thing.
Well, I mean, that's the GOAT right there. And he's the one that came up with it. And I mean, he just described it perfectly. The terminology that I often use is, and he kind of alluded to it there, if you're trying to win the moment, you have to be in the moment. And you can't win the current moment if you're thinking about the previous moment. And what I love the way he just said right there is that play you made a few moments ago, it was absolutely important then, but it's not important now because it's in the rear view mirror. So we need you fully focused and present right now. And that was absolutely brilliant. And I'll share this bit of insight as well. I told you that, and I even say that in the beginning of my book, I give Coach K the full credit for coming up with this terminology. Now, in theory, the concept of next play is a derivative of focusing on what you can control and letting go of what you can't. And that's one of the main primary pillars of Stoicism. So even Coach K would admit that he might have coined the term, but he's still drawing on something that's been around for thousands of years. The concept of next play I learned from Coach K. I saw put in practice by Mike Jones at DeMatha. And when I was deciding to write the book, I started to have a little hesitancy because I'm thinking, why am I going to write a book about a concept that someone else came up with? Like, shouldn't I write something that has my own IP, my own invention, if you will? And I talked to a really good friend and mentor of mine, someone I really trust and respect and value. And I shared this dilemma with him. And he said, Alan, what's more important to you? Coming up with something and getting credit for inventing it, or passing on something that you know really works and has impacted your life? And I said, well, yeah, I'd much rather pay it forward, something that I know works and something I've implemented. And then I'll just share it through my lens of this is how I use Next Play and this is how I think about it. And he said, yeah, don't have any hesitancy in writing that. And we both said, and I say this with the highest regard, I am a huge Ryan Holiday fan. Love Ryan Holiday's books, love his and to Ryan's own admission, nearly everything he shares is his interpretation of Stoicism. He didn't come up with any of this stuff. It's all Marcus Aurelius and all of those guys. But what he does is Ryan does a masterful job of translating it and sharing how to apply it in today's world and how he utilizes it. And that's the way that I look at Next Play. I did not come up with it, but boy, can I share it and pay it forward in teaching folks how to use it.
What I love about the clip is his unlock is to make sure you're talking about it. So if we want to just take this even further than we already have, I think it's really important. You learned it from Coach Jones, is it has to be what we call front loaded. Pete Carroll talks about this a lot. Whenever you walk into his facility, he front loads what's most important, meaning like it's the first thing you see when you walk into the building. So if we want to make this a part of our culture, a part of our program, it needs to be talked about often. And I think it might sound silly to some folks listening, but literally saying the words next play often and reiterating in a game, next play, next play. Like, how do we create next play mentality, next play culture? It's by saying those words consistently. So if you were to piggyback on what Coach K was saying about how we talk about it, what are some pieces of advice you'd give for coaches out there to bring this from like insight into action?
Well, you just said it right there. It needs to become the vernacular and a part of the terminology. It needs to be talked about all of the time. You need to hold depending on the age, but assuming it's collegiate or high school or youth, you need to have a parent meeting and tell the parents, we would encourage you to use this mentality when you're talking to your child. Like, that's the only thing we want to hear you yelling from the stands is next play.
Nice.
That's the only thing we want you talking about in the car ride home. That's the only thing we want you talking about at the dinner table tonight when you talk about, like, reinforce it in every way, shape, or form. Make sure everyone on staff is using that exact same terminology. We want to keep talking about, reinforcing, and emphasizing it over and over and over, because as I said before, repetition is not punishment. Repetition is the oldest and most effective form of learning and skill acquisition on the planet. So we have to keep talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. And then it'll just like the description that I gave earlier about learning the new move in basketball, then it will just become secondary. It will become unconscious competence, and we'll be able to do it without even giving it much thought.
Man, I've been really enjoying this conversation about going super deep in next play mentality. It's not just something we talk about, it's a part of an identity, and it's really a total game changer in the way that people show up. Athletes, coaches, parents, leaders, anybody out there. One of my favorite parts about the book was the very end. You wrote a poem about next play mentality, and I read it a few times. I've highlighted it, and I come back to it often because I think it's so beautifully written. Would you be opposed, Alan, to closing down our conversation today, reciting that poem?
I'd be happy to, and I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. Next phase, next chapter, next move, next stage, next proposal, next meal, next talk, next page, next pitch, next shot, next game, next day, next meeting, next sale, next step, next play. Next play is a mindset that changes the game. It's a powerful tool that allows a reframe. I learned of this concept from the brilliant Coach K. Now let me teach you how to apply next play. The buzzer goes off, the shot clock turns red, you missed a wide open shot, then hang your head. But you know you can't choose to stay that way. You must quickly rise up and hit the next play. You made some mistakes, you lost the lead fast. No sense in worrying, that's all in the past. Get back to the present, as that is the way. It's time to lock in to the very next play. Right now in this moment, you must make a choice. Trust the work you've put in and your inner voice. You don't get to rewind and there is no replay. You must focus on now and the very next play. That turnover, gone. That foul, let it go. Believe in yourself and let your confidence show. Don't sulk, don't pout, and do not delay. Take a deep breath and attack the next play. When pressure mounts and the stakes are high, when you start to feel your self-belief run dry, You need to make a choice and you need to say, this is my moment. I own the next play. Accept your flaws and missteps, then clear the slate. They don't define you and they're not your fate. Don't dwell, don't whine, and don't overstay. Recenter fast and crush the next play. Take a breath, glean a smile, and give yourself grace because you're in control. You set the pace. Decide to take action and don't look away. Unlock your greatness in the very next play. You're not playing the scoreboard, it's you versus you. Stop comparing yourself and do the best you can do. You'll either win or you'll learn, and both are okay, so bounce back hard and win the next play. When you fail or you lose, have the faith to keep going and the strength and the confidence from the mere fact of knowing that what's done is done, and at the end of the day, your future is bright, so win the next play. And if you're stressed or consumed with worry, when you feel overwhelmed or in a big hurry, take a moment to smile and enjoy this day and live fully present by applying next play.
Alan Stein Jr., ladies and gentlemen. Alan, where can my listeners get the book and how can we best support you?
Well, it's most easily found on Amazon, where I think a lot of folks get their books, and Audible if you'd like to listen to the audio book. And I will say that my two previous books are your traditional nonfiction books, which means they're 15 chapters, they're 275 pages, they're 75,000 words. And I was very intentional in making Next Play a bite-sized version of that. Next Play is about the third of the word count and page count. In fact, the entire audiobook reading only took me 3 hours, as opposed to 8.5 for the previous two books. So literally, you could listen to Next Play from start to finish in about the same time as a Joe Rogan podcast, because I wanted something that was very bite-sized and very applicable. If you'd like more information on Next Play, I have information on the book and on the keynote that I do along with it at alansteinjr.com. And then, of course, you can follow on social at Alan Stein Jr. And I'll continue to post concepts and videos and maybe even some more poems about Next Play on my social. But this was so much fun, man. I really appreciate the opportunity to come back on. I appreciate your support and the great work that you do. And if anyone wants to keep this conversation going, or you believe that a Next Play mentality would help your team or your school or your corporate group, please hit me up, Alan at alansteinjr.com, and it'd be my honor to help you move to that next play.
Now, it's such a pleasure, man. You're such a great spirit. I always feel better after talking to you or even after listening to some of your videos on YouTube. So thanks for the message and thanks for the contagious spirit that you bring everywhere you go. I appreciate you.
Thank you.